They were children, small hands, young minds, baby teeth still falling out. But inside some of them was something else entirely. A darkness no one saw coming. A violence no one believed possible. We like to think of childhood as a time of innocence, a place untouched by cruelty. But what happens when that innocence is only a mask? Not every killer is a monster in the shadows. Some sit quietly in classrooms. Some sleep with teddy bears after unspeakable acts. These aren't the names you've heard before. They aren't the faces plastered across tabloids or documentaries. These are the forgotten ones, the hidden horrors, the cases swept aside because they don't fit the narrative that children can't be evil, but they can be, and they were. This is not a list of the faint of heart. These are the stories that haunt the quiet corners of police files, the ones that make seasoned detectives lose sleep. These are the top 5 most evil children you've never heard of. Real stories, real names, real nightmares. Let's begin. Number 5, Paris Bennett, USA, age 13. Number 5, a boy with a genius-level IQ, a mind that could have built rockets, cured diseases, or written novels. But instead, that mind chose something else. It chose murder. Paris Bennett was just 13 years old when he killed his 4-year-old sister. Not out of rage, not by accident, but with planning, with precision, with a purpose so cruel, even the coldest hearts recoil from it. On February 5th, 2007, in the small town of Abilene, Texas, Paris waited for the moment. His mother, Charity, was working the late shift. The babysitter was in another room, dozing off, trusting that all was well. That trust would be shattered within minutes. Paris walked into his sister Ella's bedroom. The girl adored him. She looked up to him, followed him around the house like a shadow. She never saw it coming. He attacked her with a knife, stabbing her 17 times. 17, not out of frenzy, but control. He called 911 afterward, pretending it had just happened. Feigned panic, tried to save face. But when police and paramedics arrived, the lie fell apart. The scene was too clean, the attack too deliberate. Paris wasn't shocked or hysterical. He was composed. Then the truth began to unravel, and what they uncovered was almost too cruel to comprehend. Paris didn't kill out of a mental break. He didn't hear voices. He wasn't overtaken by psychosis. In fact, he had refused to take his medication that night, on purpose, to stay clear-minded. He wanted his mother to suffer. Charity Bennett had struggled to raise Paris. She was a recovering addict, but she was trying. She'd built a life, kept her son close, protected her daughter, but Paris didn't forgive. In later interviews and psychological assessments, Paris confessed, "If I killed Ella, it would cause pain to my mother. And if I caused her pain, she'd go back to drugs. And if she went back to drugs, I could destroy her life completely." A 13-year-old said that. A 13-year-old designed that. When he was evaluated by forensic psychiatrists, they found something chilling. Paris had no remorse. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He was eerily calm, articulate, calculating. A textbook sociopath. But what made it worse was how aware he was of it. Charity, shattered by her daughter's murder, still visited her son in juvenile prison. For years, she believed he could be helped, that he was sick, not evil. But eventually the mask slipped. In a recorded conversation years later, Paris stared into the camera and told his mother the truth again. No sugarcoating, no denial. "I chose to do it. I knew what I was doing. I wanted her dead." And then he smiled. Paris Bennett is now over 30 years old. He is still behind bars in Texas, serving a 40-year sentence for second-degree murder. But here's the part that chills deep in the crime itself. He's eligible for parole in less than 15 years. If released, he will walk free before his 50th birthday, free to start a life, free after ending one with a knife and trying to destroy another through grief. Charity, his mother, has publicly said she fears what her son could do if released, not just to her, but to others. "I believe he is still dangerous," she once said in an interview. "He's not cured. He's just waiting." Paris Bennett is a name on most true crime lists. His case didn't lead to major laws or TV dramatizations, but it should have, because it shows something few people are willing to believe, that sometimes evil doesn't grow in the dark. It's born in the light, and it smiles when it stabs. That was number 5. Let's move to number 4. Number 4, Cody Posey, USA, age 14. Number 4, a ranch in the middle of nowhere. Endless fields, open skies, and no neighbors for miles. It should have been peaceful. It should have been safe. But on that quiet stretch of New Mexico land, a 14-year-old boy made sure it wasn't. Cody Posey looked like any other farm kid. Quiet, hard-working, respectful. He lived on a sprawling ranch owned by television journalist Sam Donaldson. To outsiders, Cody was just another boy doing chores, going to school, try to grow up. But behind the doors of his family's home, something much darker was growing. On July 5th, 2004, Cody Posey snapped. Or at least, that's what he claimed. He waited until his father, stepmother, and stepsister were distracted. Then he grabbed a loaded .38 revolver. First, he shot his father, Delbert Posey, in the head. Then his stepmother, try one. Then his 13-year-old stepsister, Mary Lee. One by one, no hesitation. But it didn't stop there. Cody dragged their bodies into a manure pile behind the barn and buried them beneath the filth. Then he went back inside, cleaned up, and carried on like nothing had happened. For 4 days, he lived in that house, alone, with their blood still in the cracks of the floorboards. When ranch workers noticed something was wrong, the horror was finally uncovered. And so is a question that still haunts anyone who hears the story. Why did he do it? Cody claimed abuse. He told investigators that his father was cruel, physically and emotionally, that his stepmother humiliated him, that he was pushed to the edge, and no one listened. Some believed him. Others weren't so sure. The details didn't fully add up. Cody's behavior after the murders was calm, deliberate. He tried to cover his tracks, hide the bodies, destroy evidence. There was no panic, no breakdown, just silence. A few of Cody's classmates later said he'd talked about killing his family before. Once, casually mentioning how easy it would be to shoot them and bury the evidence. At the time, they thought he was joking, but he wasn't. In court, Cody sat expressionless, a teenager with a baby face, being tried for the cold-blooded execution of 3 people, one of them just a child like him. His defense attorneys leaned heavily into the abuse claims. They painted a picture of a boy trapped in a household of fear, beaten into submission, emotionally scarred. They argued that the murders weren't premeditated. They were a desperate outburst from a broken child. The prosecution disagreed. They argued that Cody planned the killings, chose his moment, and acted with chilling control. Ultimately, the jury believed something in between. Cody was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and second-degree murder, not first-degree. He was sentenced to remain in juvenile custody until the age of 21. And then, he walked free. In 2010, Cody Posey was released from custody. His record sealed, his identity protected. He's in his early 30s now, somewhere in America, living a life his victims never got. No one knows what name he goes by. No one knows what he looks like today. But people still remember the silence of that ranch. The smell of manure masking something far worse beneath it. Was Cody Posey a victim who broke under pressure? Or was he something far darker? A boy who chose murder, not as a last resort, but as an escape? A final, fatal decision with no tears and no remorse. Some say he was protecting himself. Others say he just wanted out. And the truth? It may still be buried, just like the bodies he tried to hide. That was number 4. And number 3 is even worse. Number 3, Brenda Spencer, USA, age 16. Number 3, it happened on a Monday morning. Children arrived at school with lunchboxes and backpacks, waving goodbye to their parents. And then, without warning, the shooting started. The shooter wasn't a man in tactical gear. It wasn't a stranger. It was a 16-year-old girl with freckles, red hair, and a grin that would freeze your blood. This is a forgotten origin of the school shooter. Her name was Brenda and Spencer. And on January 29th, 1979, she turned her home, located directly across the street from Grover Cleveland Elementary School in San Diego, into a sniper's nest, armed with a semi-automatic .22 caliber rifle her father had given her as a Christmas gift. Brenda positioned herself by the window, and as students gathered at the front gates of school, she opened fire. Principal Burton Ragg ran outside to help the children. She shot him dead. Custodian Mike Sucher followed to pull the wounded to safety. She killed him, too. Then she continued shooting at children. 8 kids were hit. Some were shot in the chest. 1 was shot in the neck. Somehow, all 8 survived. But the trauma didn't end at the scene, because when police finally made contact with Brenda and asked the only question that mattered, why, she gave an answer no one would forget. I don't like Mondays. This livens up the day. That was her explanation. That was it. No grief, no guilt, just a cold, detached smirk through the phone line. Brenda then held police at bay for over 6 hours during a standoff, laughing and joking in between negotiations. She eventually surrendered, but not before becoming a twisted kind of legend. The phrase, "I don't like Mondays," would become a haunting pop culture reference, immortalized in a song by the Boomtown Rats. But what the headlines never quite captured was the emptiness behind the act. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't driven by bullying or desperation. It was boredom. In the investigation that followed, police learned that Brenda had a long history of disturbing behavior. She tortured animals. She expressed a desire to shoot police officers. She bragged about wanting to do something big, something people would remember, and then she did. Her home life wasn't stable. She lived with her alcoholic father in a house filled with neglect and depression. There were signs of abuse. She slept on a mattress in the living room, surrounded by empty beer bottles and spent rifle shells. But what disturbed investigators more than her environment was her demeanor. Even in custody, she joked about the murders. She told officers that watching the children fall was like shooting ducks in a pond. She showed no remorse, not in court, not in interviews, not even decades later. In 1980, Brenda Spencer was tried as an adult. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and assault with a deadly weapon. She was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. She has been denied parole multiple times. In her hearings, she has occasionally tried to blame the shooting on medication, seizures, or undiagnosed illnesses. But those who studied her case, and especially those who survived it, don't believe the explanations, because the truth is more chilling. Brenda didn't snap. She prepared. She loaded the rifle. She picked the time. And she aimed at children. Not one shot was accidental. And while other school shooters have become infamous over the decades, Brenda Spencer remains an outlier. A girl who opened fire for no reason other than she was bored. No manifesto. No trauma speech. No final words of protest. Just a 16-year-old who didn't want to go to school and made sure no one else would either. Today, Brenda is still incarcerated at the California Institution for Women. She's in her 60s now, but her voice still echoes through history. Her words, her grin, her chilling answer. A warning, perhaps, that sometimes evil doesn't come with a cause. Sometimes it just doesn't like Mondays. That was number 3. And if you think it couldn't get worse, wait until you meet number 2. Number 2, Dendrick Owens, USA, age 6. Number 2, a first grade classroom. Crayons, storybooks, tiny desks. It's supposed to be the safest place in the world. But on February 29th, 2000, inside Buell Elementary School in Mount Morris Township, Michigan, safety died, and a 6-year-old boy pulled the trigger. His name was Dendrick Owens. He stood just 4 feet tall. He still believed in cartoons and superheroes. But that morning, he came to school with a stolen .32 caliber handgun hidden in his jacket. No one noticed, not the bus driver, not the teachers. When Dendrick entered his first grade classroom, he walked directly up to a classmate, Kayla Rowland, just 6 years old, bright-eyed, kind, a little girl who liked playing tag and coloring flowers. And then he said the words no child should ever hear. "I don't like you. and he shot her in the chest, in front of the class. She died moments later, in the arms of her teacher, a child murdered by another child. And the world struggled to understand what had just happened. Was Dendrick evil? Or was he a product of a system that never gave him a chance? Because Dendrick Owens wasn't a normal kid. He grew up in chaos. He lived in a crack house with relatives and drug dealers. His home had no stable adults, no supervision, no routine. At night, he heard gunfire. He knew how to load a pistol. He had already brought a knife to school once before. And the gun? It wasn't his. It was left out by his uncle, a convicted felon. Loaded, unlocked, easily accessible. Dendrick took it, not out of careful planning, but out of impulse. He had no idea what forever meant, but that doesn't make the outcome less horrifying. Kayla Rowland was an innocent, a straight-A student. She'd been kind to Dendrick, even tried to help him when he got in trouble. But the day before the shooting, the two had an argument, a scuffle on the playground. Childish, temporary, the kind of thing kids forget after recess. But the next morning, Dendrick made a choice that changed everything. He pulled a trigger that never should have been in his hands. And for that, a child died. The aftermath was chaos. Prosecutors were faced with a legal nightmare. A killer too young to stand trial. Dendrick was 6, legally, in the eyes of the state. He couldn't form criminal intent. He couldn't even be charged with murder. So instead, the justice system turned its focus on the adults around him. His uncle, Jamel James, was arrested for involuntary manslaughter for leaving the weapon unsecured. He was sentenced to prison. The school was criticized for failing to notice the gun. The community collapsed into grief. And Dendrick? He was placed under intense psychiatric observation and eventually into the custody of Child Welfare Services. He became the youngest school shooter in American history. But unlike others on this list, he never saw a prison cell, never went to trial, never received a formal sentence. Because in the eyes of the law, he was just a boy. But for the family of Kayla Rowland, that distinction brought no comfort. Her mother later said, "I lost my daughter, and the boy who killed her got to grow up." What makes this case so chilling isn't just the age, it's the absence of understanding. Dendrick didn't seem to fully comprehend what he'd done. When police took him into custody, he asked if he could go to recess. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He just waited. Today, Dendrick Owens is an adult. His identity is protected. His location unknown. Some say he turned his life around. Others say that shadow never truly leaves. But one fact remains. He is the only first grader in modern American history to bring a loaded gun to school and use it, a 6-year-old killer, and a world that still doesn't know who failed him first. That was number 2. And number 1, it's the darkest case of them all. A child whose crimes were so twisted, so cold-blooded, that even hardened criminals were horrified. Don't look away. Number 1 is next. Number 1, Willie Bosket, USA, age 15. Number 1. Some children break rules. Some break hearts. But Willie Bosket, he broke history. He was so violent, so unrelenting, that the government changed the law just to contain him. By age 15, he had killed. And he wasn't done yet. This is the story of a boy the system created and could never control. Born in 1962 in Harlem, New York, Willie Bosket never had a chance. His father, Butch Bosket, was a convicted murderer. His grandfather had killed a man. And before he could even speak, Willie was surrounded by rage. He was molested by relatives, beaten brutally, passed around between institutions. By age 9, he was setting fires and stealing. By 10, he was diagnosed with a dangerously high IQ and an even higher level of rage. But no one stepped in to stop him. Instead, the anger grew, and then he snapped. In March 1978, just 15 years old, Willie boarded a New York subway train. He approached a passenger, no reason, no provocation, and pulled out a revolver. He shot and killed 26-year-old Noel Perez. 2 weeks later, he did it again, shot and killed another man during a robbery. Within a month, Willie Bosket had murdered 2 strangers, cold-blooded, point-blank, no remorse. But when he was caught, the justice system hit a wall. In New York at that time, the law didn't allow juveniles under 16 to be tried as adults, no matter the crime. Willie was sentenced to just 5 years in a youth facility for 2 murders. The public was outraged. Newspapers exploded. Families of the victims demanded justice. And the state listened. In 1978, lawmakers passed the Juvenile Offender Act, directly inspired by Willie's case. It allowed children as young as 13 to be charged as adults for serious crimes. It became one of the most significant shifts in juvenile law in American history. Willie Bosket didn't just commit evil, he reshaped the system. But the story doesn't end there, because once Willie was released, the violence continued. He assaulted guards, stabbed inmates, set fires, and by the time he turned 18, he was locked up again, this time for good. He attacked officers in court, tried to escape, made homemade flamethrowers in his cell. His rage was endless, so they buried him, not in the ground, but in solitary confinement. For decades, Willie Bosket has lived in total isolation, a one-man cell, no windows, no human contact, 23 hours a day. He's only allowed out for a single hour in a concrete cage. His solitary confinement is so severe that no other prisoner in modern New York history has endured anything like it, and he earned every second of it. His prison records read like war logs: dozens of attacks, weapons crafted from razors and broomsticks, bomb threats, escape attempts. He once carved "I kill" into the walls of his own fingernails. He is, in every sense, a permanent threat. But what makes this case different from every other on this list is legacy. Willie Bosket isn't just a killer, he's a legal turning point. Thousands of juveniles since have been tried as adults because of his name. Entire debates around youth punishment, rehabilitation versus retribution, lead back to him. And he's still alive, still serving time. The boy who murdered at 15 is now over 60 and still locked away. A judge once said, "If we let him out, he will kill again." That was number 1. The most evil child you've never heard of, not just for what he did, but for how it changed everything. This has been the most evil children you've never heard of. If you think childhood innocence is guaranteed, think again. These were the most evil children you've never heard of. Kids who weren't just troubled, they were terrifying. Innocence isn't promised. Childhood doesn't always mean harmless. And in some rare, haunting cases, it becomes lethal. But before you sleep tonight, ask yourself, what makes a child evil? Is it nature, nurture, or something far more disturbing that we still don't understand? If this video disturbed you, shocked you, or made you think, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because there are far more stories like this waiting in the dark. And trust me, these weren't the only ones. Stay curious, stay careful, and never forget, sometimes evil wears the face of a child.